Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I have so many memories with this game. Remember the good old-fashioned double pack of Clone Wars and Tetris Worlds? That's what we're talking about today, baby. I remember when my Xbox broke. I was so upset, man. I want to play Oddworld Munch's Odyssey, which was a launch game for the original Xbox. I want to play this so bad, but I couldn't. So my dad, being the absolute Chad he is, was like, don't worry, son. We'll get you a new one. So we had to save up a little bit. We went to Best Buy. We got a replacement Xbox, and it came with this game, which is right behind me, packaged in. Star Wars Clone Wars, I remember, was a game that started to develop that feeling in me that I still experience nowadays with some games, which is I clash pretty hard with strictly vehicular games. I like to get it all. The vehicle, the ground combat, I like to do everything. And I wanted a Star Wars game that did that. Star Wars Clone Wars kind of does that in particular modes and levels, and we'll get into all of that. But the reason we're talking about Clone Wars today is because over on Retro Rewind, we're gonna be talking about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. And it's gonna be out this week, so you can go ahead and check that out, link down below if you're interested in subscribing there. I swear the way we've started this at the perfect time is incredible, because Star Wars and its prequels are back in the theater. We just finished our Sam Raimi trilogy retrospective and ranking them all, and those were in theaters. And then next month is Lord of the Rings returning in theaters. So it seems like we just launched at the perfect time. We're gonna be talking about all that stuff moving into June, so I cannot wait. Right now, we're going through all of the prequels. We just did episode 1 last week on Rewind, as well as Phantom Menace last week for our Retro Alliance. And so I'm really excited to talk about a game that is truly near and dear to my heart in a particular way, and that's Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So let's not delay any further. If you're new here and you're interested in nostalgic and retrospective content, consider subscribing. I want to start off at the top with who made this game, because I'm going to be honest, I've played this one a lot. I played it growing up, but I didn't know who made it. And when I found out, I went, makes so much sense. The developer behind Star Wars: The Clone Wars was none other than Pandemic Studios, the developers of Battlefront, Mercenaries, and The Saboteur. They are one of my favorite developers ever. Unfortunately, they're no longer in business, but everything they made during that 2000s era turned to gold. Every game I've just mentioned is phenomenal. And to see this here, it makes so much sense because it really is the beginning of the road to Star Wars Battlefront, and inevitably the goated Star Wars Battlefront 2, which we'll talk about that development and that history in a little bit. But I had to shout this one out because I wasn't aware. When you look at the double pack, and I'll show it in the complete box experience, Pandemic's a very, very small logo there. And then I guess I was too young to really process the information on screen when it splashed there before me before I hit the main menu. Nonetheless, Pandemic is behind this one, and it focuses on one of my favorite eras in Star Wars, in the Clone Wars. In particular, it focuses on the aftermath of Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, where you have the Battle of Geonosis. What happens afterwards? That's what the story here hones in on. We actually have a write-in here from our Patreon, patreon.com/RetroRevive, where you can sign up there and be a part of the show. Adam Hood asks us, how well do you feel the game captured the atmosphere and aesthetic of the Clone Wars era, including its planets, vehicles, and weaponry? I have to say, as someone who played and recorded everything via Xbox Series X back compat, this game holds up remarkably well on a visual front. I think there's a lot of detail packed into all the ships. I love the variety of ones that you could fly around and drive around, and the sounds. The planets themselves are big and expansive, really open to beckon exploration, even if there's a lot of invisible walls that forbid that. It still does ask you to do so. I was surprised by how big this game was. Now, I always associate my Star Wars games with Xbox, and I think this is the reason why. It's hard to say on the weaponry side of things because you don't get very close to the action outside of the occasional ground level where you're typically playing as a Jedi. We'll talk about controls and that sort of stuff soon. But when it comes to the actual vehicles, the details, the way they move around, the sounds they make, I feel like they captured it really well. Of course, the music from the films is blasting in your ears, so it really captures to me that era perfectly well, right? It's these big bombastic fights, there's tons of vehicles and droids and explosions everywhere. It feels epic because of the music. So to me, I feel even to this day, they've captured that era extremely well. The way I would describe Star Wars: The Clone Wars nowadays to people, particularly Nintendo fans, would be it's Star Fox Assault but Star Wars, except a little mid. So I have not played much Star Fox in my day, but if there is a Star Fox game I absolutely adore, top to bottom, you bet your butt it's Star Fox Assault. That is the exact game I wanted from Star Fox. Get me on the ground with a gun, running around the levels, tons of pickups, tons of collectibles, tons of comms between all of the characters, and then, of course, the ship levels. I don't know if that's a hot take or not for Star Fox fans, but I love Star Fox Assault. Star Wars Clone Wars is very much like that. You ride around in a vehicle of some kind for most of the mission, and then you end up in a section on the ground. Whether you're playing as a Jedi or a clone trooper, you get a mixture of both. The problem for this game nowadays is the controls are awful. This was made at a time where we were still figuring out third-person controls. How does the camera work in connection with the actual movement analog stick? Which button controls the camera? Yes, because we weren't at that point where it was a natural thought like, oh, third person, you rotate the camera with the right thumbstick. This game, it allows you to shift the camera, but it snaps back into view. And you don't really use the right thumbstick to, for example, when you're riding around a vehicle, help guide the controls. I really don't think outside of Halo Combat Evolved, many people understood how to use both analog sticks properly in the early 2000s. And I'm not talking about the first-person shooting gameplay for Halo Combat Evolved. I'm talking about when you were in the Warthog, driving with the left thumbstick and then steering with the right thumbstick via the camera. It was so natural, it made so much sense, and it's so funny because we actually talked about it in our Resident Evil 6 retrospective late last year, which was that even to that point in time, we were still figuring out how third-person cameras work, how does cover shooting work. Even if you had great examples like Gears of War, you were still seeing people trying to figure it out and do it a little differently, a little gimmicky. And so that's why I think some of the big problems with Star Wars Clone Wars are a little forgivable given the time period. But we have write-ins here like this one from Quentin, who said how shocked he was when he played it because it's not aged well, especially the ground levels. So as a kid who dreaded being the vehicles, I looked so forward to being in the ground levels because that's what I really wanted to do here. I enjoyed games growing up like Star Wars Obi-Wan because it was just you wielding a lightsaber. And we'd get into eventually Battlefront where I wanted a game, let me be a clone trooper or whatever, and there was an answer there. But when it came to Clone Wars, I wanted to run around as Mace Windu because for my kid brain, it just didn't make sense that I'm a Jedi. Like I should just be running around wrecking stuff with my lightsaber, with the Force. Why am I out here riding a vehicle? I'm stronger than this vehicle, for God's sakes. At least, again, that's how my kid brain rationalized it. So young Maddie was so excited to put his boots on the ground, take out that purple lightsaber, and get to work on some droids. But then modern Maddie started running around and went, oh boy, the AI is funky. Like you have these Geonosians running at you and just freezing in place, not really doing much. You have to orient the character and rotate the character with the left analog stick. Like it's all just on one analog stick. It's what? If this game let you use the right analog stick for camera control in a typical way, I think this game would age a million times better. But there's also no defensive options. This is something I talked about in Phantom Menace where you had to time your attacks with the blaster bolts coming your way. In this game, it's automatic, so there's a little bit of that, but if you start moving at all while you're getting shot at, you're gonna lose health. So there's no way to defend and mobilize. There's dodge rolls and jumps you can do, but again, because of the way the camera works and the movement works, you don't really cover much distance and get toward your objective while avoiding damage. Like, it controls pretty poorly. But what it does put a spotlight on in the more retrospective manner is if you're like me and you've played a lot of Clone Wars growing up and you realize, oh, this is from Pandemic, and they went on to make Battlefront and then Battlefront 2, you can see the gradual evolution of this company, right? You look at Clone Wars and just how stuck to the ground you are in the ground levels. You look at how the camera works and it just doesn't feel great. Battlefront 1 kind of functions a lot of the same way. They bring the camera very close to your back. It doesn't really feel good to move around. And Battlefront 2 is where they got it. They pulled the FOV out completely. There's dodge rolls in almost every direction. There's jumping in every direction. Left stick, right stick, it all felt good. Not only that, but you included the on-the-ground gameplay for the lightsabers, feeling remarkably better compared to where it started in Clone Wars. The clone troopers, or droids, feeling way better to use compared to where they were in Clone Wars. It is a remarkable, shocking, stunning glow-up to witness when you've played all of these games through. It really was the beginning of the all-encompassing Star Wars experience here with Clone Wars. You had the Jedi, the clone troopers, the vehicles you could ride around in, multiple planets. Conquest was even here as a multiplayer mode. This mode would be directly carried over into Battlefront, as we all know. That was the definitive mode. But for me, when it came to Clone Wars, there was one single mode that was, to me, the definitive mode. The only way you could access this mode is by completing 20 bonus objectives or putting in cheat codes, which I'm pretty confident I did as a kid because, again, I wasn't crazy on all the vehicle gameplay. I can't imagine I had enough patience to really push deep into this game, especially when I knew there were cheat codes like invulnerability and unlocking all of the bonuses like Yoda in the Jedi Academy, or yes, the Jedi Academy itself. So just real quickly, every story mission has a series of bonus objectives. You know, complete this in X amount of time, don't get hit here, destroy these objectives, collect that. It adds a little bit of replayability to the missions because as you go through it, you're going to unlock things like the studio photo, you're going to unlock movies, trailers, and modes. Like I mentioned, maps, like I mentioned, Renvar, and you can unlock the dual mode. Like you can access a lot of content through this, which I love how old games were structured. Play through the story, extract all the value, master it, and then you have a ton of different modes and characters to play as in these bonus sections. Now, if you completed 20 bonus objectives, you'd unlock the Jedi Academy. This would drop you right in the heart of Geonosis, where the camera perspective changed dramatically. It's now not this vehicle game that controlled as you would expect. It was no longer this janky ground combat game. It was a horde mode game now. And this is where I spent an abundance of my time with Clone Wars when I had it on my original Xbox. I would just sit there and play this endlessly. It's a wave-based mode. Every wave, new enemies come out at you. Sometimes new allies appear, power-ups drop on the floor like health upgrades, and you wipe out waves and waves of Geonosians, of droids, super battle droids, and so on. And I got super into it. You could throw your lightsaber, which you can already do in all the other modes, but wiping out like 18 enemies with a single throw of the lightsaber always felt great. Force push worked well. You have a bunch of different characters you can select to play as, from Anakin and Obi-Wan to Yoda. You can play as the clone troopers, as the battle droids. I will just say that the clone troopers definitely aren't great unless they're in a support role. So you can play this on your own, which is what I did a lot as a kid, or you can play it with up to 4 friends. So I think the battle droid or the clone trooper would be great to have alongside you if there were other Jedi supporting them. The game still does disperse other members throughout to help you in these battles, but they're not perfect, and we know that. You can pull this camera out sky high, which is surprising. You can pull it in as close as possible. It's really interesting to see how this is like 3 games in one, just they all kind of share mechanics, and it's all dictated by the camera. It's a really interesting game to look at if you're like me and you love Pandemic, to see what they were toying with and how they would build upon these ideas, and not just build, but make the best Star Wars game imaginable years later in 2005, while this was a 2003 game. So they were just 2 years away from Battlefront 2 at this point. They took this tech, built Battlefront, and then took that tech and built Battlefront 2. And there you have it. It's a fascinating game to look at through that lens, but playing it nowadays, it doesn't feel as great as I would hope it would. But I have to say, the music, the art design, it is a wonderful game to look at. And I do enjoy the vehicle levels nowadays. The difficulty is kind of insane though. I mean, I was having a tough time. Like, I was desperately looking for health pickups. There are moments where enemies are spawning all over, and I think the balancing is pretty poor in that regard. It's one thing if you just want to beat me up. It's another thing when you beat me because I cleared out a wave of enemies and then they spawn back there again just because of, I guess, where I was on the level versus the objective. That can be really frustrating. It's also frustrating when you fail a mission because, like, your teammate died and you have to protect your AI teammate. I think you can actually do damage to, so a little frustrating there. But nonetheless, let's finally do it, right? Let's get into a complete in-box experience for Clone Wars. This is one I've been dying to do on the channel for years now. So let's take a look at this double pack of Tetris Worlds and Star Wars Clone Wars. And here it is, the famous double pack. No back of the box for this one necessarily to read. This is a promotional offer. It wasn't for resale. Bought it on eBay anyway because we break the rules out here. You can see the spine has both Clone Wars and Tetris Worlds on the side here. This was an Xbox special though, man. They always did the double packs. And this was, to me, the most recognizable one. This is why I miss Pandemic, as I said earlier. It's just tucked away here on the right side. But yeah, no real back of the box to get into, but fret not. This came with not just one manual, but two manuals. So you have the Clone Wars manual, which we'll be going through. But yes, Tetris Worlds does have a manual, as you'll see here. A beautiful one at that. Completely illustrated, super colorful. As a kid, I actually enjoyed this game a lot, and they're promoting on the back MotoGP 2. It comes here with a Xbox Live 2-month free trial. It does have the double disc here. Now, for those wondering if you're like a Series X or Xbox One owner, can I throw this in my Xbox? What games work? It's going to download Clone Wars. It's actually compatible with Clone Wars. Nothing happens with Tetris Worlds. If you fire this up on your original Xbox, you get brought to a menu that has Clone Wars, Tetris Worlds, and something for MechAssault Live. So you can go ahead and check that out if you're ever curious. But yeah, if you're looking to pick up Clone Wars, you don't need to find like an exclusive Clone Wars only copy to play in back compat. You can just throw this double disc in and it'll work, which was kind of interesting to say the least. So let's go ahead and put these away. We're going to take a look at the manual here for Clone Wars. Absolutely got to say, I love the cover art for this game. Clones are my favorite faction in Star Wars. I think it's unsurprising to everybody, but I just love how they appear, and this, just having a sea of them, I mean, it again embodies like my favorite part of the prequels next to Order 66. So I just really love the imagery there. Unfortunately though, this one is in black and white, so I don't know if it was LucasArts or if it was Xbox. Someone was going soft on the inking here. They break down the controls, and this is where it gets a little interesting, as I was talking about earlier. So you see here, it combines the vehicle controls as well as the on-foot controls, but you'll see here that the right thumbstick rotates the camera. The problem is it snaps back into place, whereas the left thumbstick is for thrusting and steering, as well as the left and right triggers here being described as what'll strafe or turn the turrets. It's a really interesting game in its suite of controls and just how many things play differently here. You can actually press the white button and it'll be, I think, LB on your Xbox controller. That'll toggle between first person and third person. This is interesting because yes, you can run around as a Jedi in first person. It looks as terrible as you'd imagine. The FOV was not kind to it. They break down Xbox Live here and what matches you can play. I didn't play much online games on my Xbox, or really ever until the 360, so I didn't have too much experience with that. I always love when games have the character profiles using the in-game models, because you can just see how not great they look. Like, look at Anakin. Look at this dude, looking a little doofy here. But they have everyone here that you'd recognize: Anakin, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, Count Dooku. But here you see like Sidon Frax, Barra Kazan, Luminar Unduli. I mean, these are more deep-cut names here. And then you have all of the vehicles you can use: the speeder bike, the fighter tank, the AT-XT assault walker. You could ride a Maru around. You have the Republic gunship you can use, the mobile assault cannon, AT-TE walker. I mean, they let you really play around vehicle-wise with the power fantasy. Speaking of power, there are power-ups you can get, as I mentioned earlier. All the multiplayer modes they go through, they break down Conquest here, which is literally what you'd see in Star Wars Battlefront. Give you some combat tips here. And then you get to the back of the manual where they're promoting one of my favorite games on the original Xbox. I love Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. It's really my introduction, my only experience with Indiana Jones, but this game kicks butt. We talked about it in our Remembering the Indiana Jones games video. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is a very nostalgic complete in-box experience for Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I want to wrap things up with a write-in. Andrew Martinez asks how this game ranks in my collection of Star Wars games. I have so many memories with this game. You know, this is why I am so grateful to all of you. I'm not just saying this, man. Like, I am so grateful to all of you, because I can't describe the feeling it provides me when I sit down with certain games that I have so many memories with. Even Clone Wars, which is a game I do like, and I'll rank it in a moment. I have so many memories with it, though. I distinctly remember like standing there in that Best Buy with my dad, holding the box, looking at the back with the art on it, seeing Clone Wars, seeing it was the packaged in game alongside Tetris World. That's why I was an Xbox kid growing up, man. Like, they had Munch's Odyssey, they had these weird exclusives, and then they had these packaged in games, and it just defined so much of my early memories as a gamer. Of course, I would get KOTOR later that year from a Circuit City, once again with my dad, you know? So just these games, as they are for you, for me, are these strong looking through the windows into the past. And even though I don't love everything about Clone Wars, it hits me in a particular way because it's such a strong core memory. It felt like at this time was when I fell in love truly with gaming. I always played games since Pokemon Blue on my Game Boy Color when I was 3, I want to say. I remember it so well, but it wasn't really until the Nintendo 64 with Spider-Man 64 and Pokemon Stadium, and then the original Xbox with Munch's Odyssey, one of my favorite games ever, as well as Clone Wars and NFL Fever and Tetris World, that I just realized I love playing these things. And the dream was always to just have a career on games, and to now be here doing this, not with just one channel, but 3 across not just the games, but the movies they were connected to that I was watching at that point in my life. It's an indescribable feeling. So while Star Wars Clone Wars doesn't rank high on the pantheon of Star Wars games for me personally, like, I would say it's kind of like a B tier game, and that's definitely nostalgia doing some heavy lifting. In all actuality, objectivity, it's probably a C tier game, but there's just too many memories packed into this. This really felt like the beginning of something for me, even if it's not my favorite game ever, and I can wax poetic on every level from top to bottom. It was that moment as a kid where you're just like, I love video games, and I'm playing this thing that even like nowadays, if I played a game and only 1/3 of it is what I was obsessed with, which in this case was the Jedi Academy, guess what happens? That game either gets reviewed and I talk about how I don't really like most of the game, or I drop it. And nowadays, but back then, that was all I had. And I was like, I love this part of the game, and I'm just gonna play this so much. And that was everything to me, man. So thank you. Even though I know you were asking where I would rank it, which again, B tier, it's all right. I'm so thankful to all of you for supporting what we do here, allowing me, Locke, Josh, Simon to all do our thing, come together between illustrations, edits, different perspectives on gaming to make something special here. And so this game means a lot to me in a very unique way, not from the, it's so good, oh my God, the story, but again, just buying it. Just buying it and seeing it packaged in with the Xbox means so much to my memories and growing as a gamer. So thank you for tuning in. If you listened this deep, thank you for listening to my emotional ramblings. I do genuinely appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on Star Wars Clone Wars down below. And with that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.